Warm greetings, everyone. On behalf of W4W Foundation, a think tank instituted as Citizens Collective, we welcome you to another session of Wednesdays for Water. The conversation today is on water and justice, social and economic considerations for decision making. The objective of Wednesdays for Water is to engage in conversation with water experts, grassroots practitioners, policymakers, and youth to explore the complex intertwined issues associated with water and the possible solutions these people are making. It has expanded since then to have more activities like the Friday Waters and the Monday Munching and Musing with Women for Water. Besides organizing on site water workshops, water walks and talks, seminars, special courses, and conference panels to continue the water conversation in various possible ways. At W4W, we believe that water conversation is crucial to move towards water conservation. My name is Mansee Bal Bhargava, and I'm the host for the session from W4W and the Water Resources Council of the Women's Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. In today's session on water and justice, social and economic considerations for decision making, we are grateful to have Professor P.B. Anand as a speaker and Professor L. Venkatachalam and Anisha Samantara as discussants. First of all, thank you all of you for agreeing to share your insights on the subject as we take things from here. As we know, at the heart of SDG, it is about inclusiveness, equitable, and fair access to safe drinking water and sanitation. However, economic pressures from agriculture, industrialization, urban population, and many other water-intensive services sectors actually stretch the resilience of water delivery institutions and mechanisms. How do we approach these issues from a justice angle? What economic social assessment tools and approaches can help us protecting the human rights of water while advancing efficient use of water as a precious economic resource as well as common pool resource? Can these help us navigate the additional challenges posed on climate emergency and many more such questions? And for that, we have our speaker of the session, Professor P.B. Anand, who is a professor of public policy and sustainable development at the Department of Peace Studies and International Development at the University of Bradford. He is author of one of the first studies to apply Amartya Sen's capability approach to issues related to economics of water and river water disputes. It's a very good time to talk about the latter part as well, while the former part has been always a discourse in water. His work on applying the capability approach to sustainable cities is presented as chapters in the Common et al. 2018 and 2024 amongst many of his publications. Thank you, Professor Anand, to accept our invitation and enlighten us for this session today. Over to you, and the screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mansee, and also Suresh for inviting me to this forum. And we're all friends, so I can also see some our alumni, Bhavna, as well. So very nice to see that you're able to join, Bhavna. So I think a lot of you are already familiar with my work, but 45 minutes or something is very short time to go deep into these topics, but I will touch on some of the issues and examples. When I chose this topic about a month ago, water and justice, I wasn't going to speak about river water disputes at all, but suddenly we are in a situation where river water disputes, especially the Indus, water treaty, has become center stage. So I cannot not speak about it. So I will spend a little bit of time in the later part speaking about that. Before I proceed, let me just add 2 points. So one is, I think, water in general, it's my view is that it's an over-researched subject in the sense that it has come from the legacy of the colonial gaze, if you like, of Western scholars in the early stages of development studies, finding water as an easy subject to theorize and to examine the social context. As a result, we have a plethora of studies looking at that, and we have to be careful not to fall into that trap. So that is number one. And number two is over a period of time, of course, MDG and then now the SDG 6, there has been a lot of work focusing on particular kinds of indicators and things like that. So that is really very useful. And also we have the human right to water finally kind of recognized. But what real progress has been made is questionable. And that's where I think the clash between, if you like, a technocratic or techno-economic kind of predominant policy focus versus a more nuanced human rights and human security centered thinking, which is very essential, but which is a lot more difficult to implement. So that I think that clash of these two ways or systems of thinking, I think produces some interesting challenges, and probably that's where I think there is much more potential to explore. I have just also, I don't know, you can't see where I'm pointing at the background. There is a big painting there. So kind of related to the colonial Western gaze is also the romanticization of carrying of water by women and things. That's a painting of village women carrying water, etc. So that's the kind of background I think I wanted you to remember. As some of my work, some of you are already familiar, and Mansee also mentioned about Professor Komim et al., our book Social Choice Agency, Inclusiveness, and there are some others. My earlier work is on the scarcity entitlements, and in that actually I spent about 2 chapters looking at river water disputes, so I'll come back to that. Okay, so first reflection, water scarcity on a blue planet. So if a Martian were to end up on Earth, they might be wondering why we are spending so much time talking about water scarcity on this planet, which is a blue planet, right? So we have, of course, the UN SDG 6, and these are headlines of various things. We are all familiar with these, but in particular, maybe when we look at the person-centered aspect, I think the drinking water and sanitation figures, those are really important, that we know that only 73% of people have access to safely managed water and 57% to sanitation. And these figures hide a lot of challenges in access that people do face. So I think in that context, when we think of water and justice, how do we understand scarcity, and how do we move away from scarcity discourses to capabilities discussion? Capability approach speaks about the idea of all possible beings and doings that a person can achieve and values and has reason to value. So that a kind of complex expression, but what it means is we should not look at water as a commodity, and rather we have to ask in terms of what freedoms the person can achieve. So this is changing that emphasis from commodity to freedoms, I think enables us to think about what are the outcomes actually we are interested in rather than the commodity itself. So what is scarcity? We all know, again, the kind of standard definition, less than 1,000 cubic meters per capita water stress, less than 600 cubic meters per capita water scarcity, or less than 300 cubic meters acute water scarcity. But when you look at it, places like Dubai or Singapore have less than 300 cubic meter per capita, but there is 24/7 clean, high quality drinking water there. So we don't think of the situation when you are in Singapore or Dubai that there is a water scarcity. So what is happening there? There are other indicators such as, for example, number of months per year when the water demand exceeds water availability greater than 1. So there are some areas where it's throughout the year there is water scarcity 12 months in a year, and there are others where there is no water scarcity in any month because the demand is less than the availability. So this is another way of looking at it. A third indicator for perhaps we're familiar with is this is the drought vulnerability index. Again, this kind of map looks very scary because almost whole world is painted in orange and red colors, which just kind of highlights, the vulnerability that can exist in any parts of the world. In my work, I have looked at these issues quite a number of times. I'm starting from a book I mentioned also more recently. So this is just an example. So these are all countries with less than 1,000 cubic meters per capita of water availability. So going according to the definition we saw, they're all countries in water stress, right? So in those countries, I just kind of mapped what percentage of people have access to water. So this is percentage of population with access to water. So even in countries with very little in terms of water availability, almost 100% of people have water access. So while these are kind of crude ways in which we can think of water scarcity, we have to be careful. Availability does not translate to access. So access is provided if you have the wherewithal, institutions and policies. It is possible to provide that access even if you have less than 1,000 cubic meters. So if anybody says that our country has only less than, 900 cubic meters per capita, that does not automatically justify the existence of water scarcity. We had also looked at, again, within environmental economics, we are familiar with this idea of environmental Kuznets curve. So Professor Venkat also would would be very familiar with this. So is there a kind of a Kuznets curve? I mean, in the sense, is what lack of access to water, is it a problem of development? So at low levels of development, maybe very few people have access. At high levels of development, and the process of transition, where many people get access. So we can see those kinds of relationships. There isn't much evidence. So something similar I can show you in terms of more recent data. So this is, again, average GDP per capita on x-axis and proportion of population with access to water. So in general, there is a weak kind of relationship, 0.421, weak relationship. So we cannot say that it is a question of poverty or it's a question of stage of development, that it is inevitable that some people will not have access to water. A similar kind of graph is found in the World Water Development Report by UN Water, last year's report, Water and Peace. So we find this GDP versus water availability. Very similar point that I was trying to make, they have also made in that report. Okay, so the second one, in general, water is sexier than sanitation. I think no politician wants to appear inaugurating a toilet, but when it is about inaugurating a water supply project or what, kind of water pumps or wells, etc., they would be very happy. So there is a kind of a political bias towards water supply. So we would expect more people to have, more percentage of population in general to have access to water than sanitation. We find that especially in some contexts that is true. In some cases, the reverse is also true. So there are countries where more people have access to sanitation than to water. So do you want to guess which are these ABC? Okay, so these are Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Ghana. So in case of Ghana, more than 80% of people have access to water, but only, less than 20% have access to sanitation. Ethiopia, both are, around 40%. In case of Rwanda, it's approaching 60, but slightly more people have access to sanitation than water. So you can see this kind of, slight variations, and this kind of puzzles, people, why there is progress on one and not the other. So from this part, I would say my findings are that water scarcity is not primarily caused by lack of water resources. It is caused mainly by the challenges associated with designing and developing appropriate institutional arrangements and creating efficient allocation of water. Efficiency is a very important concept because a lot of perception about water being a gift given by the nature, so it should be free. I think that complicates efficient allocation of water, and there is a lot of politicization of water use as well. And investing in infrastructure and management capacity, I think these are very important. Without these, then that's what translates into water scarcity. So going back to the example, even though Singapore and Dubai have less than 300 cubic meters per capita of water, they have all of these things, and that's what makes them to be able to deliver 24/7 clean water to their citizens at an affordable kind of price. Okay, so because the title is Justice and Water, so I thought I'll just mention a little bit about it. So within the capability approach, we look at this kind of idea of justice, and Professor Amartya Sen's idea of justice is a phenomenal work in that context. But also, I think we should look at the John Rawls's work as well. So both of those, combining these, I was reflecting on my work in relation to sustainability, and I have come up with this idea of 6 dimensions of justice. So what are these 6 dimensions? I tend to think in terms of locally, nationally, globally, and then within present generation and between present and future generations. So that's what gives you these 6 cells, if you like. So let's just look at one of these cells. First one, for example, water inequalities between rich and the poor locally in the present generation. So we are not talking here, we're not talking about sustainability between present and future generations. When there is so much inequality and injustice within the present generation, we have to address that. So one example is that within our cities, we know that rich people have much better access to water than poor people. And in my own work, I have seen, and others also have seen this. So this is, for example, the amount of liters per capita of water that I found that people in Chennai can have. If they're a high income household, they can almost command 160 liters per capita per day, whereas a poorer household hardly commands 40 liters per capita per day. So we can see that, this is very important. So there is a lot of work going on about groundwater depletion, for example. So that can be an example of how injustice locally affects future generations, because present generation is pumping the groundwater, and over a period of time, this groundwater depletion leads to impoverishing the future generation. Justice nationally. So in this case, for example, transboundary within this intrastate or interstate transfers or interbasin transfers and stuff like that. So those can affect future generations. But in the present context, nationally, so there is this urban-rural divide. For example, a lot of water is transferred to big cities, but in the head locations actually are on the way. There are water scarcity. We have seen, for example, a few years ago, citizens of Delhi, perhaps including Mansee, woke up in the morning to find that there were no water because the farmers in Haryana decided to stop the big pipes coming, delivering water to Delhi. So those are kind of examples we can think of. Again, here we see that in any big city, we can see core city gets a lot more water per capita per day than in the peripheral areas. So this is again, very familiar to colleagues. Agriculture versus domestic use. So this is an interesting thing, and this actually creates much more tensions. So this is again from the World Water Development Report, UN Water. This is 2023, even the 24 report also something similar. So low-income countries, almost 90% of water is used for agriculture. Water withdrawn is used for agriculture. Whereas in high-income country, only 44% of water withdrawn is for agriculture. So this is 39% for industry and the domestic use. So as countries like India, Pakistan, etc. in South Asia transition to becoming middle-income and high-income countries, we can also expect this kind of shift. And this shift itself will put a lot of tension, if you like, because agricultural water allocation is already, highly contested. So if more water has to be diverted for industrial and municipal uses, then that's going to create future tension. So that's what we can think from that. So that is a kind of example of those 6 dimensions of justice I want you to keep in mind. Okay, since time is very limited, I thought, okay, I'll focus a little bit on the transboundary issues. So going back to our SDGs report, 59% of the world's transboundary basin areas has an operational arrangement for water cooperation. This would include Indus Water Treaty as well. Obviously, there is a lot of work going on transboundary waters, and Professor R.N. Wolf and various colleagues have done a lot of work, and also UN Water has a number of resources. So transboundary waters, we know, account for 60% of the world's freshwater flows, and many countries and territories lie within that. So if we look at, again, this is from World Water Development Report. So mean discharge for the year and how it is changing compared to 1991 to 2020. So over a period of time, how it is changing. Is it much below now or is it above? So orange colors indicate that the discharge now is much less than it was 20 years ago. So then we can see this is where the climate change and all these things are feeding into. So the orange areas, that's where we would expect any transboundary cooperation agreements to come under stress, right? So now the question, can India really, this is from BBC, yeah? So this photo, and can India really stop water flowing? So a lot of discussion. If you look Google search, Google Trends, suddenly everybody is looking for Indus Water Treaty, which is interesting, which is very good. A lot of YouTube and also news programs educating us about waking up to Indus Water Treaty. But many of us have been working on this for some time. So this is a very interesting article, International Conflict and Cooperation of Freshwater Resources. This is in Nature Sustainability. So they looked at BAR scale, Basins at Risk scale from 1948 to 2008. So this is quite a long period, 60 years, over 60 years, which basins have actually the, minus score means changes towards more conflict. Plus score means the changes towards cooperation. So these are the top 10 they identified as the most conflictive basins. Where is Indus here? It's not there. So I think that is a very interesting thing to remember. Even though everyone is now suddenly thinking that Indus is going to be the cause of the war. Actually, for a lot of time, including in Professor Aaron Wolf's lectures, Indus Water Treaty is cited as one of the most successful, if you like, treaties or most durable treaties because it has endured even wars, etc. Again, all of the audience here will be very familiar with this. I don't need to spend. Indus Water Treaty divides these rivers. It's a very, very interesting agreement they have arrived at. It took 10 years, of course, but with 1950 to 1960. So the idea is that to divide eastern rivers and western rivers. So the eastern rivers are given to India. So that would be the Ravi, Bias, and Satluj given to India, and then Jhelum, Chenab, and Indus given to Pakistan. So, and there is already before 1948, already there have been a lot of irrigation works in both India and Pakistan, and those irrigation works had to be protected and continued. So I think that legacy is also forgotten. Many people who are giving lectures on the news media don't mention about this. And the treaty itself is very interesting. So the text of the treaty actually is very illuminative, and I think it's very forward-looking, for its time. So the main point I want to highlight here is within the preamble is that therefore of fixing and delimiting in a spirit of goodwill and friendship. So the rights and obligations. So these words, goodwill and friendship, I think is very, very important. So that's what has been the motivation for the treaty. Okay, I think some of you are familiar with this. So we call it symmetric and asymmetric externalities. So when two countries are sharing a lake, then achieving a cooperation, transboundary cooperation is very, very easy, much easier because the externalities means whether it is because of extracting water or dumping pollution or something happening to fisheries, etc. The cooperation possibility is much easier. But when it is a river, then there are challenges. We call it asymmetric externalities. So in this case, then both for water withdrawal decisions, pollution decisions, and various others, a lot of challenges are there. And this is where power and, in terms of possibilities for negotiation, interdependence, etc., these come into picture. And therefore, agreement is difficult and depends on many, many factors. And we have seen this again. This is from Professor Wolf's study. Some of you would be familiar with this. This is a Senegal basin. So he kind of plotted it from 1950 to 2000. They have actual transboundary water disputes database, and they see that over 100 years, actually most of the water-related relationships between countries has been more positive rather than negative. So in this case, I think there's an interesting argument that as water flows become less, then the tension on treaties also becomes more, so it becomes more difficult to achieve cooperation. One final point I want to make before reaching to conclusion so that I can give time for Professor Venkat and Anisha to give their comments, is that there are these 6 within international water law, especially in relation to sharing of transboundary resources. You can think of these 6 principles. These inform countries at different points in time, or different countries might use one or more of these principles as their kind of tools, if you like, to argue. So first one is absolute sovereignty. So this is called the Harman Doctrine. This is from Rio Grande River between USA and Mexico, 1895. So in that time, it was kind of USA was trying to argue that as long as the river flows within one's country, the country has, absolute sovereignty over it. It can do whatever with that river. So this is a very, if you like, dangerous argument to make. In general, most countries these days, I think, would not take up this, especially for transboundary rivers, would not take up for this. For the other rights kick in. The second one is called the absolute riverine integrity or territorial integrity. So this is especially useful or taken up by lower riparians when they claim that natural flow of the river is they have a right, absolute right to that. So suddenly now, if an upstream country wants to build a dam or something, then they can say that, absolute riverine integrity is being affected. So Egypt and Ethiopia, in case of Grand Renaissance Dam, this has been invoked sometimes. The third one is related to this, which is called the prior appropriation or first claim based on historical water use rights. So again, this is where the access to water has been documented, well documented, then that can be used as a way of first claim principle. The fourth one is a limited territorial sovereignty. So where both countries recognize that we are codependent and we are not absolute. This is very important, especially when, for example, international boundaries sometimes use rivers as the international boundary. So in that case, half of the river is on the other country and half. So a part of Sutlej is like that. Part of Sutlej is, the international boundary line is actually between Pakistan. And so there, even though Sutlej is supposed to be entirely for, Eastern River and given to India, so Pakistan could extract water by, doing various things, not directly, but indirectly. So that, I think, therefore, that codependence has to be recognized. And the fifth one is the equitable allocation. So here, river is considered as a common property, and especially here, trying to make it more like a symmetric externality. Just like in the case of Lake Victoria, even countries which are not directly on the lake, but are recognized as riparian countries, because the waters flowing into the lake are actually in those countries. So for example, Burundi and Rwanda also have claims on Lake Victoria because of that. So I think that equitable allocation principle sometimes can help. And final one is theoretically, the ideal situation is the basin-wide management. If you can actually come up with a basin-wide management agreement, I think that is a fantastic one. So Rhine agreement took so many years, more than 50 years to get to that. But that's, I think, is a good example. And there are a few others as well. So from literature, previously Indus Water Treaty was considered as a very, very cooperative scenario. But now, because of the recent things, it has moved into, this corner. Okay, I mean, we can go into the theoretical way in which you can resolve this with costs and benefits, but I think I can skip that. But I want to conclude by showing this. This is in terms of this is from the Global World Water Development Report of 2024, recent one on glaciers. And so worldwide, all the glaciers are in decline. We can see in every single glacier, throughout this year, there are minuses more, right? And all the glacier volumes are decreasing. So what does it mean? So it has implications for Indus in terms of what Indus glacier, also the glaciers that are feeding, especially in Tibet, feeding into Indus and some of the other rivers, they are kind of, receding. As a result, in the short term, there could be a significant amount of flows as this trend continues, but long term can be a very significant decline. In the meantime, there is also population growth is happening, and then a very severe politicization of the river because of the geographic, geostrategic, or geopolitical context. I think that makes it very, very difficult for a kind of a cooperative agreement, durable cooperative agreement to exist. So the fact that it existed for 60 years itself is very surprising. But to what extent this goodwill and friendship can be reestablished and continued is a big question. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Anand, for the wonderful insight and also making us think many times, especially the transboundary and what is hovering on all of us right now. And importantly, I think for me, the key takeaways are the principles that you not only talked about water share, but also the 6 dimensions of justice, which can be extended to transboundary, as you rightly showed. But before we get into the Q&A, may I just request all the participants, first of all, we are grateful that you keep joining us. And also request them to please post their questions and comments in the chat box. And meanwhile, I will invite Professor L. Venkatachalam to be the discussant and initiate the discussion for all of us. Professor Venkatachalam is the RBI Chair Professor and holding the position at the Madras Institute of Development Studies, Chennai. Before joining the MIDS in 2006, he worked as an assistant professor at the Institute of Social and Economic Change, Bengaluru, and as consultant environmental economist with the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change, New Delhi. He's the recipient of prestigious awards such as Fulbright Nehru, the Senior Research Fellowship, Indo-Canadian Visiting Fellowship, GDN's outstanding research on development economics, just to name a few. He has published several research articles in national and international journals and book and many research reports which he has in his resume. And I'm going to invite Professor Venkatachalam to pose his questions as well as his thoughts on the presentation by Professor Anand and take the conversation further. Thank you, Professor Venkat, to join us today. Over to you. And may I request Professor Anand to close the presentation, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mansee. Thank you, Professor Anand, for the excellent presentation covering various important issues pertaining to water management. I'm going to start from the kind of final point that you have raised, namely the basin-wide management, which is very important. Okay, as far as water is concerned, the management has to start from the micro level, and then it should be scaled up at the basin level. One of the issues that we right now confront with is that do we have adequate information to make informed policy decisions regarding water allocation efficiently, equitably, and sustainably? As far as India is concerned, we have not made any concrete effort to prepare water accounting at the basin level. When we talk about basin level management, we don't know how much water is available in the basin, during which time period the water is available, how much water occurs because of due to rainfall, how much water occurs from tributaries within the basin, how much water is exported into the basin from other basins, and how much water is getting evaporated, how much water is getting evapotranspired, how much water seeps into the ground subsurface area, how much water is being wasted into oceans. For example, in Kaveri River Basin, during rainy season, we waste huge amount of water. Sometimes it is 350 TMC of water within a very short span of time, within a week. And this 350 TMC of water is sufficient to cultivate the entire land area in the basin for the entire year. So within a week, we waste, this huge amount of water because we don't have storage facilities to hold this water so that this wasted water can be used efficiently for economic activities. Okay, so how much water is being wasted? How much water is being used in the agriculture sector, where it is being used. For example, in the Kaveri Basin, in the upstream area, in Karnataka, for example, how much water is being used for paddy crop, sugarcane crop, and other high water intensive crop. How much water is being used in the Delta region in Tamil Nadu? How much water is being used for livestock purpose? How much water is being used for household purpose from the basin? How much water is being used for industrial purpose? How much pollution enters the river basin, right from the beginning of Kaveri Basin, for example, Madikeri, all those places. Almost all the important cities are located on the banks of the Kaveri River Basin. And in India, we don't treat the sewage water at all. And in certain major cities like Chennai, only maximum of 45% of the sewage water is being treated. And the remaining 55% ends up in water bodies, which are being used for drinking purpose. Okay. For example, I saw one picture very recently. The Chennai is getting raw water from 7 different sources for drinking purpose. One of the sources is Pudal Lake. And in the downstream, water is being drawn for drinking purpose. But in the upstream, huge quantity of sewage water enters the Pudal Lake. So sewage water is not being treated, and therefore, all that I am trying to say is that there is no proper information about the quantity and quality of water that are available, that is available in the river basin. So therefore, we have to immediately initiate a kind of work on water accounting. So let us take the basin, river basin, as a unit of analysis, and then do this water accounting properly so that we can get adequate information about the water availability, how efficiently it is used in different sectors. And you have been talking about water use in agriculture sector. And there are many studies which have claimed that around 15 to 25% of the water used in the agriculture sector can be smoothly transferred from the agriculture sector to other sectors, like urban areas, without affecting any production and productivity. Indeed, in many of the canal irrigated areas, soil salinity has become a serious problem because you have 24 hours of water supply during a particular time period in this particular region, and therefore there is a possibility for reducing the water use in the agriculture sector, which will indeed improve the productivity, profitability, etc. So therefore, in order to understand the macro picture at the river basin level, we need to initiate water accounting. So how do you kind of see that? What's the difficulty in doing such kind of exercise? That will be very useful for us to take informed policies. Second thing is economic valuation. You have touched upon economic valuation. What is the value of water used in different sectors? Because the water that is used in urban areas is not available for agriculture, or the water used in agriculture is not available for urban use or livestock or industry. So in that sense, the water is relatively scarce. So we need to find out what is the value of these ecosystem services that are being generated by the water resources. Indeed, initially we have to do physical accounting under the water accounting mechanism system. And then we have to supplement that with the economic valuation. So what is the value of water used in agriculture, used in industry, urban areas, etc. So very recently, the Tamil Nadu government wanted MIDS to take up a study on estimating the ecosystem values generated by the wetlands. So the Tamil Nadu government has identified 80 priority wetlands across the state, and they wanted us to estimate the ecosystem values. What we have found is that with the present condition, all these 80 wetlands are generating around 4,500 crores worth of value per year, ecosystem values. But then, all these wetlands are experiencing problems like encroachment, pollution, invasive species. They are infested with invasive species, and then siltation, all those kinds of things. So what we have found was that in case all these problems are addressed, then in case if we improve the quality of these 80 wetlands to the maximum extent possible, towards the maximum capacity, then all these 80 wetlands can generate 17,400 crores worth of benefits every year. That means that every year we are losing around 13,000 crores worth of benefits because of not maintaining these wetlands. So this is considered to be a kind of important kind of input for policy making. Based on this study, the Tamil Nadu government now has kind of allocated some 500 crores towards protecting the wetlands. And so therefore, the information about the economic values is very important for the policymakers to get sensitized about the issues that we confront with in the water sector. And the third aspect is that, so the question is therefore, how do we make the kind of economic valuation as a very important tool for decision making and how we can sensitize people to take up more economic valuation studies and make use of the inputs from these studies for efficient policy making in the area of water management. And the third and last kind of issue is that you have talked about institutions, property rights, the historical rights, all those kinds of things. In one of the studies that we have taken up in the Bhavani River Basin, so what we have found is that there is a huge conflict between the farmers within the basin. So you have the old canal system farmers and the new canal system farmers. The lower Bhavani project is considered to be a new canal system. And the old canal system farmers have this historical right. Whatever the water that is available in the basin will have to be used first by these old canal system farmers. And if there is some surplus, that will be used by the new canal system farmers. Okay. So because of this historical kind of right, so there is always a conflict between the old canal system farmers and the new canal system farmers. Then we wanted to have some kind of institutional intervention. So we wanted to test whether the quotient property rights framework works in the Bhavani context, so that the conflict between the farmers themselves can be addressed properly. So we went to the old canal system farmers, some of the randomly selected farmers, and asked them, if you are being compensated, will you be willing to transfer some amount of water to the new canal system farmers? Indeed, there is a study conducted by the Water Issues Organization, Tamil Nadu government, which suggested that within the old canal system farmers, old canal system, if the farmers use some of the modern techniques, irrigation techniques, then they will be able to save 15 to 20% of the water, which can be transferred to new canal system farmers. So we explained everything to these old canal system farmers, and many of them have agreed to this kind of arrangement because they see compensation to be a kind of incentive for them to save water and then transfer it to the new canal system. And then we also went to the new canal system farmers and asked them, in case you get additional irrigation water, will you be willing to pay for this thing? Of course, this is within the typical market framework. We have conducted this study, but still this study provided an important kind of information, namely with the new institutional arrangement, namely the property rights.
All participants are requested to please keep their mic on mute. I'm sorry. And Professor Venkat, may I request you to please initiate the conversation? Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Because we will run out of time otherwise.
Yeah. So we found that around 65% of the farmers in both the canal system are willing to trade water, provided there is a proper institutional arrangement which is being established to facilitate this market transaction. And therefore, we suggested that the river basin board, for managing the river water, we need river basin boards to be created, which will consist of different stakeholders, and then they will decide about how much water should be allocated to which sector, etc., etc. So my question is, of course, the point is that, so how are we going to create this system where the information, scientific information is being generated periodically, like water accounting that is being done periodically, economic valuation that is being done periodically. So how can we strengthen the decision to be highly informed in nature? And then see, now the Indian economy, for example, is being kind of dominated by the market forces. So market plays a major role. But why this market has not been efficient or made to be efficient in managing some of these environmental resources like water? So we can think about tradable water rights and tradable pollution permits, all those kinds of things, which are being efficiently, successfully used in other parts of the world, but not in India. So, these are some of the broader questions that I would like you to kind of reflect on. So thank you very much. I'll stop here, and now we will listen
Thank you,
to
Professor.
Dr. Anish.
Thank you, Professor Venkat. Anand, if you don't mind, I will invite Anisha on board first, and then you can take both the comments later on. And yes, Dr. Anisha Samantara is a lecturer in the Department of Peace Studies and International Development at the University of Bradford. She was a Commonwealth Scholar for her master's and was awarded the Global Challenges Researchers Fund for her PhD, which explored community-based water management in the cities of India and Indonesia. Her research lies in the intersection of social ecological spaces, water poverty, and collective action using the capability approach and a decolonial lens, and is also informed by her experience as a scholar from the global south. Anisha, you heard both the guys, and I now hand it over to you to pose some questions, and also you have the responsibility to engage our participants from here on along with you, with Professor Anand. Over to you, Anisha, and thanks once again for agreeing to do this session with us. Yeah.
Thank you, Mansee. Thank you. It's been a privilege. It's been a privilege to be here and hear experts talk about water issues. And I think what really resonated, I think with everybody through Anand's presentation was this idea of looking at different framings of water scarcity. So from a very person-centered aspect to transboundary and very highly diplomatic areas and arenas of water discussions. So I think with the audience that we have and people that relate to issues of water and water politics, there's bits of the presentation that I think interested everyone. What I would like to do is kind of look at the policy side a little more so that we can take the discussions forward. And this is because to me personally, there was this echo, a constant deep echo about this battle and tug of war between the collective agency of citizens and also the state in the provision and the kind of war and a demand for water. So this kind of tug of war constantly appears in any kind of arena that we see where water is contested. And given Anand's work on the 6 dimensions of justice, how do we balance policy of the state with active citizenship? So that is my first question. And the second one is to do with the treaty screenshot that Anand shared about this idea of trust and goodwill. And again, because water is a public good, it is contested. There's multiple demands on water, no matter where the resource lies. So this idea of trust and goodwill is something that also is explored in Ostrom's work. So just a little bit about how these design principles and this idea of trust and cooperation come into the picture. And spotlighting Anand's recent work on social choice theory, he's talked about gender blindness in policymaking, and also the need for an ethics advisory board when we talk about water policy. So does that mean as citizens, as people that are constantly talking about water, are concerned about water, and now more so with climate change, how does that translate to a more democratized way of policy making right across the social strata? And I was looking for questions in the chat, but there aren't any. But the idea is to not be scared of asking the silliest question here. So whatever comes to your mind, please post the questions. And, we have experts here to answer these questions. And I know, some of our colleagues are here who also work on different aspects of social justice. So I encourage you to come forward and pose your questions as well. But I'll ask Anand now to please take on the discussion forward.
I'll be very brief. I know among the audience, we have many people also with kind of expertise as well. So Sharda is there. Welcome, Sharda. And also Bhavana, you are working in the field at the moment. So anything you can share also will be most welcome. So while I wait for you, I'll just add a couple of very brief responses because Professor Venkat and I, we have a long kind of friendship over several decades, so we can continue the conversations. But I'll be very brief. Yes, I completely agree. I think information is very important. So um, collecting that kind of information, I think it's now become much easier because of the satellite imageries being available more publicly also, and so how that can kind of inform the existing public databases, how that can inform, and whether government controlled or created information also. For example, in Indian case, I think the Central Groundwater Board, for example, periodically does these kind of groundwater surveys. Sometimes that information is readily published, sometimes not. So I think having access to those kinds of information, I think will be very, very important. Water is a fugitive resource, so it flows through mediums, and it's a fantastic kind of resource in terms of its chemistry and physical properties, but that also makes it very, very complex to understand and manage. So property rights of water are extremely complex, whether they should be attached with land. So if I own a piece of land, any amount of water below it is mine, or is is there a different kind of a right? So I think these are very interesting issues. So that's why I think establishing tradable water rights is that much more difficult. And this idea of upstream, downstream farmers and being able to, I completely agree that you can very easily transfer some amount of water from agriculture to industry and other uses, especially because if you think in terms of production possibility frontier, I think in many countries, including in India, agriculture is not at the most efficient. So water is being used because it is priced low or cheap. In many cases of states, elections, governments promise free water to farmers and stuff like that. So the actual true cost of water is not known. Therefore, there is an excessive use or overuse of water, because any resource that is not priced properly will be overused. And so I think it can be understood that agriculture is not on the production prosperity frontier, it's below. So transferring some amount of water to urban or industrial users should be possible technically anyway. Politically, it's a lot more, what the point I was trying to make was that politically it is because everything is allocated. The moment you say, I want to take 10 TMC feet of water from here, there will be a big hue and cry. Economic valuation, again, I think it can play a very important role. Ecosystem services, and here in the UK, we had very influential Professor Dasgupta review. Professor Partha Dasgupta, whom we all know, has has been a tremendous kind of a force in developing these methods. So those kind of methodologies and reports, those can be very useful, and even having case studies. So I think that can help to inform. But I will also put a caution, because only pushing for economic valuation, it prioritizes efficiency in the use of water versus equity, and therefore protecting the human right to water, and that's why the capability approach is very promising, because protecting that irrespective of whatever the economic value, I think that has to be protected. So just because it is much more productive to use the water to sell it to data centers who are willing to pay whatever thousands of rupees per liter, for example. But if people are going thirsty, then there is no justice. So I think that human dimension has to be protected. So I think, Anisha, your point about having this idea of an ethical kind of conscience keepers, if you like, for informing the decisions, I think that's really very, very promising, very important. And I think that is the only way we can enforce. In South African case, that is a very interesting thing when they introduced the right to water, one of the pioneering countries. So the minister had to stand up in the parliament and actually deliver a report about how they are implementing that right to water. So duty bearer institutions are very, very important. So it's creating that duty bearer institution which is accountable, and therefore a body like an ethics body which holds it to account. I think it's very important. In UK, again, sometimes our House of Lords, many people don't like House of Lords. They think of it as kind of elitist institution, but within it there are many, many very, very scholarly people who do this job of holding the government account and being able to speak truth to power and things like that. So I think creating those kinds of institutions, whether from Ostrom's framework or bottom up, ground up, or through legal technical ways. I think it's very difficult. It takes time, but it needs to be done. I think it's really important. Yeah. I think, yeah, Suresh wants to say, I think we should definitely hear from the audience.
Suresh, thank you for connecting me to Anand, Venkat, and Anisha. And by default, you get the first choice from the audience to speak the question. Over to you,
Thank you,
Suresh.
Mansee.
And we also have Bhavna. So, Anisha, I will hand it over to you to take it from here. Okay. We'll go a few minutes more also. Okay. Yeah.
Just
Go
some
ahead.
observations and a few things which I wanted to point out is that having worked in India for more than 2.5 decades and moving from practice space to academics, I was wondering that why do we go the same full way, that there is a problem of between, in India, water is seen as where citizens play an important role. And there is another model where in the developed world, there is professionals and governments managing water. There is no governance as such. So, do we need to wait for policies to have that kind of a data available, which will never be available, to come up with these kind of ecosystem services model and all those? Frankly, you are leaving the society and citizens out of this. And in a democratic setup like India, citizens at the moment do not have the say. The point is that it's not the data is not available, because it is people who used to manage water, and people have more information and knowledge. And there is something that there is a lack of trust between the government, the so-called professionals. I will also put the academics into that, as well as the consultants or technocrats. Basically, it's more an engineering-oriented discipline where water is seen as that, how it gets measured and all those. And there was also another comment Professor Venkatachalam made, that we don't treat sewage. We actually treat all the sewage only what we supply as a water. So we have only sewage flowing in the rivers, and we actually pick up the sewage and we treat it and we supply. But we don't put the right examples. We only have sewage flowing in the rivers. For example, if you take sewage goes from Delhi to Agra, and Agra picks up the sewage and treats and supplies to its city. But we try to look at answers towards Singapore, saying that Singapore is a good example where they sell the water in the bottle, and they are able to show that that's the only circular model. So with this, I will stop and would like the experts to react to this.
Would you like to take it up? Yeah.
Very, very briefly, yes. No, I wasn't suggesting Singapore as an example. So I was just mentioning that it's less than 300 cubic meters per capita, but nobody says there is water scarcity in Singapore. No, I 100% agree. So maybe there is already a circular economy of water in Indian cities, well before circular economy became important. No, I think this idea of water, in terms of sewage being pumped into rivers, I was listening to a program this morning, actually, here in Thames Water, and many of the water companies here have been doing that. So it's not a typical India problem. I think, wherever water companies can make profit, they will try to do that. And one of the easiest ways is not to treat sewage and just dump it in the rivers or water bodies. So I think, it's powerful regulatory institutions, powerful laws, and kind of penal provisions for making those kinds of things. Those are part of the story. They will not be enough. I completely agree. I think as we say, people, profit, and planet. I think here also, in the case of water, also, I think the social, economic, and environmental, all three pillars are equally important. So the ecosystem values part is that otherwise environmental services, environmental flows are neglected. Otherwise, 100% of the river gets absorbed or used. So I think the ecosystem values part is just to highlight that it's not water that's flowing, that's not taken up, is not wasted. You need that for the river to maintain its integrity and a lot of ecosystems and fauna, etc. to function. So I think that's really important. So educating people and policymakers is very crucial in that there is a certain amount of that is the obligation to the future generations. So that is where my justice framework comes into picture. Future generations, that's the obligation for future generations. We have to protect those species, etc. And also we worked on Sharda is there. We have been working on this idea of Martha Nussbaum's justice for animals. So human right to water. What about the human right of animals and ecosystems as well? So that's, I think, is very important. Yeah, I want to give a chance to Bhavna and maybe share that to say a few
I'll
words.
just take Bhavna's question here. So Bhavna has written the question in the chat. It says, should public water resources be used for high emission crops or industries? And who decides that? Bhavna, if you want to unmute yourself and ask and add to the question, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Anisha. So good to see Professor Anand and you again. So I am speaking in context of that. Like recently, I've been working with rice farmers in Andhra Pradesh in India, and of course, rice is one of the highest. India is one of the highest rice producing countries, but it's also taking stress on water resources. So. Like how can water use efficiency be incentivized in rice farming? Like we are working on alternate wetting and drying techniques in rice, which helps in reducing the water to some extent and also helps in reducing methane emissions. But how can water use efficiency be incentivized in rice farming without impacting farmer income? And also, like, who decides that how much water will be used where? Generally, as a citizen, I wanted to understand. Thank you.
Anand, you have to unmute yourself.
Anisha, do you want me to reply?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's a very, very important challenge, and you just touched on it. And even though rice is one example, I think this can be extended to many others as well. So how do we ensure that water is, not abused, if you like, and appropriated for certain uses, and how do we balance? Because there are so many different uses. So some kind of way of transparent multi-criteria thinking is needed. So that's why capability space is very helpful, because there we always say it is about, pluralistic evaluation. So not just any one particular dimension. So we have to have various kind of social goals. So this could be about, in terms of reducing thirst and making sure that everybody has adequate amount of drinking water available and water bodies are protected, adequate amount of water is available for ecosystem functionings and services, and then whatever water is used is used efficiently where it is needed and things like that. So this is over a period of time. I think it is ultimately about institutional development. And Professor Robert Wade's work, we're all familiar, over a period of time, how historically where the canal irrigation has been working for 100 years. So there, because the two typical problems of canals is they get silted, so somebody has to go and de-silt them. And number two, head-end farmers will always get advantage and tail-end farmers have to wait. So how do you resolve those kind of asymmetric externality and kind of a global public good contribution, if you like, so those institutions have emerged over a period of time through cultural practices. So I think those are very important. And Professor Aaron Wolf also has written on this in terms of, I do also a lot of work in this area. Faith institutions can be very important in shaping some of these things. So how do we bring not just the economic value, but use these kind of cultural values of water, in many faiths, giving water to someone who is thirsty is your fundamental duty, not fundamental right. It's your fundamental duty. If somebody is thirsty, you have to give water to them, even if it's an animal, right? So I think how do we use those kinds of principles to inform policy? I think that's really, really important. So how we bring these multi kind of dimensional perspectives and provide those safeguards. I think that's what is very crucial. That's what your question is. Yeah. Thank you, Bhavna.
I
Lovely
just
to see
want to
you as
add
well.
to that, Anand, that really made me think about this idea of whose knowledge is prioritized, and then also looking back at how agriculture progressed in India and what kind of neoliberal policies we were actually, thrusted by the West. And when it goes to forcing India to grow crops that India has a comparative advantage in, or say, for instance, indigo, also is responsible for a lot of famines that happened and so on. So this idea of the cultural practices and this knowledge base and the importance of this multiplicity of knowledge coming into the fore is, I think, where we're progressing with, our academic research as well. And there is a bit of this arrogance when it comes to more technocratic and engineering aspects of studying water, which I think now are being dismantled. But at the same time, research has shown that there is a lot of value in seeing what citizens and their knowledge, especially indigenous people's knowledge, and how successful it has been in managing water. Even something as simple as rainwater harvesting has sometimes more value for certain sections of population and geographical spaces than what a big dam would have in certain regions. So there is that aspect as well. So I think there is continuing research on that, and we positively think that that's going to have a lot of impact in the way that we understand and study water for the future. I can't see any other hands, but I would again, the floor is open.
Sharada is here. Probably she wants
Yes,
to.
of course.
Sharada wants to say.
I just wanted to know more about, especially Anisha has mentioned about the gender blind aspect, which I'm very keen, because it's gender conflict, abuse, because how efficiently water can reach to women, which actually help them live the flourishing life, one is. And second is that it will reduce the chances of abuse and conflict while they're walking, making a long journey to get some water. So this is the one I'm very keen to know more, that how these policies can be more gender efficient, that it reduces women's time and help them have a more flourishing life, that it should not be such a hard work to get one one tap of water, one glass of water. So that is my main interest in that. And how institutions, especially institutional development, how institutions can support them. And most of the policies are gender blind. Yes, we are thinking economically using, but how that can improve the lives of women. The efficient use of water, and how easily they can accessibility. Most important, accessibility.
Thank you, Sharada. Anand, would you like to?
Yeah, very briefly. In my book, this is one of my regrets, because I wrote about it, but I kind of, I thought it is so well known that I don't have to shout about it. But, I called it the paradigm of masculinity. So the whole, kind of a technocratic approach to water is dominated by this paradigm of masculinity. Even the expressions used are, erect a dam, and transfer, control, these are all paradigm of masculinity. So as soon as you say water scarcity or there is lack of problem, the solution is presented as, oh, we have to control it, we have to build something, we have to, whereas a feminist approach would be, much more organic and much more kind
Absolutely,
of,
yes.
And Center for Science and Environment published a very interesting book many years ago called The Dying Wisdom. So there's a lot of historical wisdom in managing water resources, which is completely ignored, and the technocratic approach takes dominance. So I think, that's number one. Number two, most of the kind of water policy making bodies themselves are dominated because of the engineering bias. They are dominated by men, if you like. So then, that also excludes, if you like, systematically women from decision-making, processes. And number three is, therefore, the priorities are kind of, those kind of the painting that I put there, romanticizing that carrying of water as if if anybody who carries water, they will know 20 kilos carrying water is not a joke. And, it's not a fun. To romanticize with paintings like that is another way of reinforcing what Martinus Baum will call, adaptive preferences. So a girl growing up will automatically think that, oh, okay, maybe there's nothing wrong in carrying water. I'm supposed to carry water. So I think, we have to dismantle those, in terms of challenge that it is a responsibility. It has to be equally shared, and it's not, if there is a failure. And number four, I think, is sanitation. I think it's, again, this is clearly shown a lot of work done, in terms of especially puberty area and schools having water and sanitation facilities, how important it is. If during puberty and adolescence, if the girl every month has to miss school for 3 or 4 days because there isn't a proper functioning toilet, in a year that translates to 3 times 10, 30 days. In 3 years, that's 90 days of missed school. So there will be a gap between a girl and boy between year 7 in high school to year 9 or year 10. So by the time they reach the public exam stage, they have already missed equivalent of a year's worth of education, if you like. Even if you assume that the quality of education is good, still they are missing, 100 days, 120 days of schooling. And that creates this systematic disparity. So whereas if you have proper functioning toilets and water in the schools, that is narrowed down. So I think these are very, very important dimensions that have to be kept in mind. Absolutely.
Thank you, Anand. I think Suresh had his hand up. I am not sure if Suresh, you want to add to something. I think you maybe brought your hand down. But
one just last question was regarding the transboundary issues, Anand. There's a major issue about data confidentiality, because the data is not accessible to the researchers or other professionals who could contribute or who could analyze and assess. It is only that people who control, like Central Water Commission in India, that data is available to them. So data are classified informations. So whether water is a classified resource or it is a public resource, which everybody should have information access, real-time access. So that, how do you answer, and how do those 6 pillars where you said, when you were talking about how does this issue get addressed into that?
No, absolutely, absolutely. My book has a very boring picture. This is just a picture of a old Kaveri Dam. So the reason I put that is, at that time there was a big board saying that you are prohibited from taking a picture of this, because the Kaveri dispute was so hard. You are not supposed to even take a picture of this. So I said, okay, let me put that on the cover of the book. So, same with the Indus Water Commission, for example. There is a data sharing required as part of the Indus Water Treaty. So I was looking for this data. If we are sharing it, why can't we see it? For last 60 years, we can't access this data. So yes, you are absolutely right. I think we have to move to the dimension of, in terms of public accountability, if you like. Again, here there's a lot of work done by organizations like MKSS, Mazdoor Kisan Sangathan Shakti. So I think that is a very good role model in terms of bottom-up demands for public and social accountability, and I think that applies equally to access, issues related to water and water governance. And the more these kind of alternative information sources we can create, I think public can be more informed, and so that can contribute to the kind of collective action that Anisha was mentioning earlier with regard to Ostrom. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I will now step in to call it off for the day, but I am also holding my questions sometimes. But before I do that, first of all, thank you all of you for joining us. We are actually inching towards 350th session in the following Friday waters. So before I ask my question, I would also like to take the opportunity to announce to all of you what we are doing in the W4W in the coming days. Next Wednesdays for Water is on April 30th, and we have a wonderful discussion again on, sorry, not April 30th, May 7th, I'm sorry, on lakes and pond series, which is our 15th and last session of the series, where we are talking about convergence of science and society in lake management. And we have none other than Professor from IISc, Professor TVR, and I think most of us know him for his water works. This week in Friday Water Art session on May 2nd, we have festivals at the Ghats of Kolkata, and we will be joined by a very vibrant team of Cultex, which is very well known for their artwork on the Ghats of Kolkata. All the sessions are usually held at 5 p.m. until the 6 p.m. Today was a special day because we are also going out transboundary in terms of water. Now, coming to the discussion today, it was very enlightening, Professor Anand, and followed by a equally powerful discussion raised by Professor Venkat on actually focusing more on how much do we know and how much the government knows, how much we know as citizens, and how much information should flow, whether it is sharing of water, whether it is transboundary from all scales, and the ecosystem value of water and all. For me, particularly, the pick of the day today was how beautifully, Mr. Anand, you made it very easy for me to understand Amartya Sen's seminal work into putting it in your work through 6 dimensions of justice. For me, it was really the pick of the day. But then followed by 6 principles of shared water. And I have also shared that I have also published 2 papers on transboundary Indus Water Treaty. And I'm really very nervous because I'm also writing a citizen science article on this right now, that how are we linking the unrest with the Indus Water Treaty, or is there something more to think about it? But we are trying to organize a session on Indus Water Treaty and the geopolitical unrest. If you know speakers, do let us know. Another important pick from today, and I think this is the first time we are hearing on Wednesdays for Water, on all the water sessions we do, that water is overstudied subject. So thank you so much, Professor Anand, because I have been really running around for 20 years to teach and learn about water in the country. And here I hear for the first time that it is overstudied subject. So I have to also recalibrate my understanding, because what I learned that in India, water is still not taught. So I'm just wondering where is the study or the education of water coming from and how it is coming from. I myself is not a water educated person, but through Wednesdays for Water, through these 350 sessions with over 600 speakers spoken on our platform, a little bit of learning is happening, at least in my head and heart. So I have to really recalibrate that. But I think the last conversation, which Sharda also raised, and you also raised it, is gender blindness in the water sector. And I think I'm so much in alignment with this conversation, and I would really like to take this conversation to the Monday munching and musing with women for water, and take this whole idea of the paradigm of masculinity. But before that, also, I'm very pleased to share all of you that we have now nearly 6 years of Water Resources Council in the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And at this moment, I'm privileged to head that council as a president. But in there, we have more than 100 women leaders, water professional leaders from the sector. We have tried to bring them together to form a council. Suresh is one of our advisors in the council, and probably he has been a very serious advisor to me, especially. So do join that council if you are a really passionate and aggressive, I will say, person who is concerned about the gender issue. We are also inching there in 100 sessions where we actually invite men and women both to talk about the women issues, women professional issues in the water sector. So just to give you an overview what we have been doing at W4W, but we are really grateful to all the participants and speakers so far for making us reach towards this benchmark of 350. And I know we have sessions until first week of September already lined up. So I can promise you that we are going at least for another 2 or 3 months from now on. Do stay tuned. And if you are interested to be speaker on our platforms, do write to us at helloww4w@gmail.com. Very simple email here. And now I pose my last question, probably the last also line from Anand, Anisha, and Venkat. And I will request you to be very brief. But the question is to Anand, and the last line from Anisha and Venkat. Anand, when we are talking about now this transboundary, and we know the unrest going on, we also know that there are a lot of transboundary issues which has come to in today's discussion. Interdistrict, interstate, and then we are talking about transboundary international. We have issues with Tista, we have issues with other rivers as well, we are seeing, and now Indus water. And we know that water cooperation has been equally studied as water conflict. What do you think as scientists, as our responsibility to give the water cooperation as this is more optimistic research kind of thing, or optimistic science? Why do you think now it's a very important time for us as scholars to really raise the bar of water cooperation and bring it to the people in a very layperson language, instead of politicians or other people really imposing on their ideas to the citizens? Over to you. It's a very sensitive question. I am aware of it, but I'm also going to take your help to get speakers for this session. An. I see a serious role we can play. Yes.
Yes. No, I think just by talking about it, we are already doing it. And I think we
Yes.
need to do that more. And we have to provide that insight and be prepared to kind of, provide different light. And to, I think ultimately the idea is that we have to respect human rights, and our commitment is towards
Yes.
peace and sustainability, and how we can achieve that through cooperation rather than coercion. But obviously, a subject like water is highly politicized, and transboundary issues, it becomes, obviously it's very important. And in some respects, some people are saying that instead of nuclear posture, water posture is better. So,
Yes.
in some respects. So that's interesting, so
Yes.
it's okay. Because emotions are running high, and we have to understand that, 26 people being killed. So it's a very, very emotive issue. So I think we have to
Yes.
let the emotions cool down, and then provide, kind of the opportunities and channels to, sorry for using the word channels, we're talking about water, but channels of communication to kind of, facilitate dialogue and discussion. In the long run, nothing but discussion and dialogue, can deliver peace. But to create that environment of trust, and that's why I highlighted those words,
Yes.
goodwill and friendship. I think that
Yes.
is really, really important. How do we create that goodwill? How do we create that friendship so that the atmosphere for the trust to share a transboundary river, instead of seeing it as a private property, it becomes more like a common property or collective property, and for collective and common good and collective benefit, if you like. So we don't want one country to prosper against another. We want everyone to prosper, but how do we achieve that? But that requires developing that goodwill and friendship. We are far away from that situation.
Yeah, thank you so much. Professor Venkat, from your talk, I could understand information and awareness is extremely important, but I would really request you to just put your last comment in 1 or 2 lines as how to really encourage citizen science, because for me, it is extremely important that we have more citizen science so that people are talking about it, at least talking about water. And that was the foundation also for the Wednesdays for Water and Friday Waters. Over to you, Professor Venkat, your last remark.
Yeah, indeed. By way of answering the questions raised by Dr. Suresh and Bhavna, I would be answering your question. So,
Yes.
Dr. Suresh was concerned about the economic value that may not necessarily result in a situation where the community management may not be a possibility. But indeed, the economic valuation, of course, as Professor Anand rightly pointed out, is a necessary condition for decision making, but not a sufficient condition. But I very strongly believe that economic valuation will definitely strengthen our decisions regarding water allocation, especially involving the right community or the voices of the community in decision making. Take, for example, the water getting transferred for consumption purpose from Veeranam Lake to Chennai. So Veeranam Lake is located some 200 kilometers south of Chennai, and every day around 150 million liters of water is being transferred from Veeranam to Chennai for drinking purpose. Of course, drinking water is very important, but at the same time, because of this water transfer, the people around, the people in around 35 villages who were using this water for various other purposes like irrigation, fishing, livestock, all those kinds of things. Now they are deprived of their own share of water. No, it's a livelihood issue. Yeah, but we are focusing mainly on
issue as well.
Exactly.
Sorry to interrupt.
Exactly. Yes. So the economic valuation, if it is being conducted properly, will approach every one of the stakeholders and then elicit their preferences and incorporate these preferences into decision making. So of course the urban consumers are benefited, but what is the loss that is being experienced by different stakeholders? So that is where the economic valuation comes in. And secondly, just one thing.
I have to really close this session. We are running very
just
late.
One thing. Who decides about water use? In India, it is basically vote politics, the lobbying from the farmers, industry, organizations, etc. But then, in Telangana, we had this chief minister called Rao, who was providing some financial incentive for the small and marginal farmers for cultivating crops. But he said, look, I will provide you this financial assistance, but don't cultivate water-intensive crops like paddy, sugarcane, etc. If you cultivate millet, then you will continue to get this financial incentive. Similarly, the central government right now is giving 6,000 rupees per year to small and marginal farmers. And I think the central government now can say that, look, you cultivate millet because central government is promoting millet cultivation. So, by using some of these existing institutions, you can change the behavior of the farmers towards more water, kind of efficient crops. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we need a separate discussion on water and agriculture, and we have had many discussions in the past I'm already inviting Bhavna to initiate a session with us. Anisha, your last word, and I'm also getting a bit greedy with having you again and again as not only a discussant, but also a speaker and moderator in our future sessions. I will really reach out to you personally for that. Anisha, your last words, and then we'll close it up for today. Thank you so much, Professor Venkat.
Thank you, Mansee, and thank you all for having us here. I think there's a lot that has been said, so I don't wish to add anything novel, but I will say that what you're doing with the Wednesdays for Water already, I think, is a first step. And it's a very important step in getting citizens involved and having a very nuanced understanding of water issues across the board. And I think it just goes back to when I was doing my PhD, and the number of articles in the work that you read just keep echoing the same thing, which is community water management just never works. You know, it's bound to fail. And I always had that hope that there's some way that, you know, we can prove that it does. And that, I think, is that hope and belief that we move forward with. And there's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot that we just have to keep finding out. So thank you for having this session. I learned a lot today, and hopefully we'll speak soon and we'll collaborate soon as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. You reiterated the words of Elinor Ostrom, and being an Ostrom scholar myself as a PhD student, I mean, I can no more agree more than what you said. So trust and reciprocity becomes the foundation of collective action. And at W4W, we have been really trying to build this collective as water scholars and water thinkers and even water concerned people. And thank you so much, all of you. I do hope that you are going to join our future conversations and also come forward to be part of being co-speaker, or help us find co-speakers and help us find very good topics. At W4W, our main intention is to have just the water conversation. We cannot claim to really do water conservation, but at least have these conversations and bring forth to all of you as a big collective where we can sit together and at least say thank you to each other for the wonderful work you all have been doing. I usually don't do any work. I just listen to your work. Thank you so much, all of you. Please take care. See you soon on Friday and Wednesday and Mondays. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you, Anand and Venkat and Anisha.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.